Hi, and welcome to The Building People, the show where we spotlight the career journeys and hard-won lessons of the people who keep Britain's buildings running. I'm Paul McCostill, I'm CEO of Grid Edge, and today I'm joined by Andre Bothma, Managing Director of Bellrock Group Assets and Energy Management Division. His background spans venture capital, proptech, and sustainability, and he spent the last few years building out Bellrock's data and energy intelligence capability. Most recently, you'll have heard of the unveiling of Symphony, Bellrock's new technology platform focused on shifting FM from reactive to preventative. And he's someone who sits in the intersection of buildings, technology, and commercial reality, which makes him exactly the type of guest that this show was built for. Andre, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. You said a lot nicer than I would have tried to summarize that. But thank you.
It's a fantastic career, though. I mean, when you look back at your journey, I mean, it's been fascinating. So, I mean, I suppose let's start by, take us back on that career journey, which led you. Your career's taken a fantastic kind of switching around the paths from, building engineer, navigating prop tech and VC. Rewind us back through the journey a little bit, and how did you get to where we are now, and what's those sort of critical lessons you've learned on the way?
So I was born in South Africa and I grew up in a family where my dad is very much an engineer and he will build literally substations from concrete all the way to power lines out, right? So that was the
All right.
environment I grew up in from a young
Yeah.
age. I did it just because, that was what I sort of like born into. And I personally never actually had a passion to be electrical. My passion was really to travel the world. That was actually my goal. And I said to my dad from an early age, I'm going to go and explore the world. And he said, fine. I thought you were going to run my business. Not happy about it, but you have to qualify in the trade. And he always pushed me to study as an engineer. And I really struggled. Like I'm not great at studying and I'm not really good at, concentrating. So I always had the goal to use that more as I need to do something because my dad said I need to qualify as something. So I sort of like qualified as an engineer as a result, but it wasn't necessarily a passion for me. So when I came over to the UK, this is now probably 23 years ago now, I fell into the industry. But again, what I was taught in South Africa as an engineer is very different to what you'd class building maintenance to be in the UK. So for me, that was another journey that I had to go on to discover and learn how do you maintain a building. The first job I landed was like a half empty building, and I was like an engineer supposed to look after the M&E part, and I found myself just studying, just learning on the job sort of thing. Like, okay, what is an HVAC system really? Because I got taught essentially as an electrical engineer, but I then had to self-taught, and I spent 11 years, I think, with Mighty, where they took me on loads of different programs and learning more about M&E. But my goal was more to be into leadership of um, maintaining or running properties rather than actually being an engineer. And my passion was never there but I always found myself back into it somehow. Anyway, so I ended up doing, I think it was like 11 or so years with Mighty, operationally managing contracts, whether it's hard services, soft services. It's no longer just engineering. And I did that for a while, but while I was doing it, I always, from a very young age, I had this passion or ambition to just make things more efficient or think of how we can do things differently rather than just accepting that we need to maintain that plant in a certain way. Because when I was doing it, I kept thinking, why am I doing this? Like, surely there's a more electronical way or electronical way of doing it or automotive way of doing it. So I always kept thinking while we're charging clients to do that service, I'm thinking there must be a faster, better way of doing it. So I took it for myself to just leave the operational side. And I think it was like 2012 where I decided to make that pivot to find solutions that actually then automate and digitize rather than just doing things manually. So that was 2012-ish, 13, when I made that conscious decision to leave ops essentially and go into tech. And that's really where my passion started around exploring, testing, trying. I started my own business that was acquired, digitizing essentially buildings. I learned so much along the way. And that's really what sparked my interest around um, investment in technology, because obviously I was looking for investment, I was looking for potential acquisition, and sort of like entered a switch in my brain. That's like really interesting, that part of the industry. I then, after spending a number of years on the technology side, realized now I need to go back to the real estate again and go apply this new knowledge and take the experience that I learned on the operational side and this technology lessons that I've learned to approach them and say that I reckon we can digitize this, and I've got some ideas of how we can do it. And JLL really gave me an interesting platform, because they were quite open to the idea, and they were like, okay, but we're not really exactly sure how you're going to do it, but there's a platform you could have a go at it. And I spent about 3 years in their engineering business in the UK, so like half a billion pound business, and it's a business called Integral, and they maintain various different contracts around the UK. So they had like a BMS business, they had various different things, and I said, I can start there. Right, you've got BMS business, they've got controls teams, and we can start there. And we sort of like started building uh, a digital program around how we could look at operational data and what can we digitize, either with sensors or with technology and whatever. And that was really a fascinating part of my career, because it's now taking the lessons that I've learned in ops and now there's tech, and we're combining it and learning as we go along. Amazing for me. And at the same time that I started that program, JLR Spark started, which is a venture capital investment within real estate. And somehow during the start of that journey, I always found myself in the middle because of my experience with ops and tech, where they would come to me and approach me and ask me for advice. Is this a good product to invest in? Is there a test bed that we could trial it? Or, sort of like being an interface between the investment team, which is not really that experience in the real estate market necessarily. So fast forward a year on, I've built a big team that was doing the smart building stuff for JLL, and Spark approached me and said, listen, could you help us? Can you support us, be part of the team? And I was really intrigued, and it was really interesting for me to now explore venture capital and prop tech really at a deeper level outside of just your standard any tech, if you like.
Yeah,
It's any sort of real estate tech. So I spent 4 years working for them and still being part and connected to what we originated, but it was on a much larger scale. I think at the time I was there, we invested in 400, how much was it? I forget the number now. But it's 55 companies, and I think it was close to 400 million that was invested in
right. Yeah.
in
Wow.
startup companies in a short space of time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's a big amount. It's a lot due diligence, and we often spend time on the boards of those startups. So I learned so much about startups and the ecosystem in startups, and it was fascinating for me. Then also learning the language between how real estate want to accept technology, what are their priorities. Now, as a startup or as a scale up, when you have a technology, you just believe that that's the best thing in the world and it has to be accepted by everyone. And I've become like a bridge between these companies and the real estate part and it's not just JLR's customers as well. And really, my role then was to really sit with those organizations and understand what's your priorities, what's your focus and where's the gaps, and then work my way back to the toolbox and going, well, actually, this could really help you, or maybe this is early stage, but you can explore stuff. So it was a fascinating experience for me to just really understand customer priorities versus the passion and the eagerness of a startup. And it was a great experience.
What an opportunity though to have that, like you say, right in the middle of all of it, where you kind of can see all the aspects, and
Yeah.
they're not all the same. They're all very different and different drivers, but you're trying to join them and to make them complement each other, sort of thing. You're trying to make these things move forward and everybody to be winning, which
Yeah.
is quite a hard thing, isn't it?
And one of the things that I've learned uh, a lot during that period was when you work for large real estate businesses or asset owners, it's often, when it comes to technology adoption, it's very similar to trying to move a tanker and trying to shift and change its direction. And when you work with scale ups or startups, you generally operate as a jet ski. And I found that there's always this ambition working for large real estate to do it yourself or to build it yourself, but it takes so long. It really depends on your goals as an organization. You really need the scale up mentality, the startup mentality to help you just fast track what you need to do. When when I joined Bellrock, one of the key reasons why I joined was a couple, but essentially for me, you have this. It's not a really super big organization. It's much smaller to manage, and it's almost like having within the real estate world having a jet ski to operate with, rather than being restricted by all this global governance generally.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating, because if you're really passionate in making change or transformation or creating, you know, an answer for what the industry is looking for, then you need to join an organization that can allow you to do it. And that's one of the key reasons why I did. And Bellrock, if you weren't aware, they're a private equity owned business, and naturally that comes with acquisition of smaller companies, and that's been helpful for me because we acquired a business. One of the key reasons why I joined was to help this business and grow this business. And when that team joined, and I think we were like 15 employees or 20 employees there, they said to me when I first joined, their biggest concerns is that they've now joined this big corporate. And I thought about and reflected quite a lot on that. On our first away day, and I sort of played it back to them, and I said, I work for two really big organizations, 110,000 employees. We're 15,000 employees, right? It's not a big corporate by any means. And it often make me realize why I'm here today, because I think as an organization, we're making some indents in the industry. We're able to adapt change. We can learn and fail fast and shift a different direction because we're a lot easier to manage.
You've got that sort of nice balance, like you say, as Bellrock being big enough to make some waves and make the industry shift and move, but nimble enough to actually get stuff done and actually be, I suppose, innovative and challenging or and do those things that is more towards, like you say, that. Because I love the jet ski analogy. I've got this image in my head. You can see that that's flying past and it's able to maneuver quickly. And Bellrock has that nice balance of both of those worlds, where it's grown up enough to have that weight, isn't it? And you've got an organisation big enough to make a difference, but nimble enough to be innovative still.
Yeah, and I think it's important to have as a leadership as well, and not just as a team, because often you have the team that's quite passionate in driving this level of innovation or change or transformation. But I think we're quite fortunate here that on the Bellrock board, there's so many people that are like our CEO, for instance, Carlo. He comes from a technology background. He comes from worked for Ericsson as an example, and so he gets it. He gets the adoption of tech in real estate. And Mark Tyson, who joined us as well, comes from Legal & General, who are one of the most advanced tech adopters in the industry, especially in the UK. So there's a lot of ambassadors in our business. We've got an amazing CIO, JJ, that joined us from, Whitbread and Costa, and amazing experience that's joined us, as well as Adam, another example. He runs our technology business, Concerto. It's been an amazing product in the industry. So from a board level, there's so much experience that is highly energized around the technology adoption. So it really helps our agenda and anyone else in our team.
Yeah, I really like that, and that deep understanding of technology that you've seen it through all those different angles, I suppose. The understand of how technology can fail or succeed in the real world is the bit and especially I've seen it in real estate. I've been in a few industries over the years, and this is a really interesting space where you can see the change that's needed, but actually to get it to work in the real life and be adopted and be embraced and whatever is really hard. But what would you say, the one thing, if you would pick one thing that you wish asset owners would really understand a bit better about what it takes to run a building, I'm going to say more intelligently, but you kind of get what I mean. What is there one thing that sticks out for you?
So I think when I'm trying to look at some examples, because there's just every organization that we work with, every customer have such a different focus on their priorities and what they need and what they want from a service. And often when you look at, let's say we're contracted to do this service as Bellrock for argument's sake, the thing that our customers are mostly focused on are the KPIs, the SLAs on your service performance, etc. When it comes to technology, is that the question?
Yeah, I suppose the question is, how do you help that technology be implemented in real life? There's loads of theory, and you see it. The tech says it can do all this stuff, but the reality is,
It so so for me, it's that understanding um, as a at a customer level, what is the real motive? What is really the motive? And we have two customers that are exactly the same as a customer profile, whether that's retail or healthcare or whatever. So the exact same profile. And they came to us with a like, we've got this and we need help with this. And they both had almost like an opposite need, but
okay.
we applying the same technology, right?
Mm.
So it's very important to understand what will be the key drivers. And an example would be one of the customers were very clear. My focus is I want to save energy, and that's it. That's how much I expect to save per month or per week. And can you help me do this? And that's all I'm interested in. Make it happen, sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other customer were more focused around I'm spending so much on my supply chain, I'm spending so much on call outs for site. And how can we predict better? How can we learn from the trends of the fault codes that come through? And how can I reduce my spend? And the byproduct of that is potentially energy saving, right? And it's so same tech, both can do the same. We offered the same reactive trend analysis to the same other customer, and they said we're not interested in that. We just want this. So I think it's if the need is very clear and there's a clear capability your end where you can demonstrate that we can do that and this is how we would do it, it's much easier to understand as a budget holder. But often what I find is the big blocker is it's easy to do one site. It's easy to do two sites. And most third party suppliers that I've worked with in the past are so focused on the PLC being a success, and it is a success, and then they move on to the next, and then it's forgotten. And even that the same POC often gets forgotten, and it's no longer that emphasis that you put in the first 3 months to make that story sound compelling. And people and companies are more focused on the next one, the next one, the next that, rather than actually just really concluding what we've done here and making sure that's a continued success. And that could be a monthly update, it could be a quarterly update, it could be like these are the things that we've learned throughout the last year, or that's what we think we should add next. It's almost like there's an analogy that I'm not going to use, but it's just like get in and move on to the next the next one. And often clients are very concerned. In my case, where we're doing 100 buildings potentially over a 6 month period, where the infrastructure that needs to be managed around what you've implemented could put risk in the organization. That could potentially have impact on loss of trade. And in a lot of the cases, if you work with retail customers, if what
Yeah.
you implement are potentially holding back systems that can prevent trade. So there's a lot of risk, and it's fine when you do one or two or three sites, but as soon as you scale up, you potentially have a call center that needs to handle things, and they need to distribute tasks, and they need to get contractors to attend. That's got no idea what you've done here.
Yeah.
There's like a really big process around how successful projects should be managed in large organizations. And that's something that's one of our big focuses in my team, is almost having a permanent project manager that really runs every project, whether it's a POC to scale size projects, as a what's the process, who's going to handle this, how's the backup for this, etc., etc. And I think a lot of organizations fear that, because I don't think everyone has the infrastructure internally to cope with that, to manage that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to be playing back in the way what you were describing. A little bit like when you're focused on that one thing, you can start to achieve lots of benefit. You then start to do it on a wider scale, and for a better word, the piece gets diluted, and you end up in this world where you're just about meeting where you need to meet, rather than when that first building might have smashed it. You might have shown the way and never quite concluded it, and then ended up going to the next one. You next know you're 100, and you,
Yeah.
like you said, you watch those organisations and literally reduce the what their impact is on every building. They've gone wide, but they haven't sustained the value in a way. And that is hard. I agree with you, what you just said there. Unless you put the effort and focus on it, how do you repeat that? How do you stay at that level? Because often that gets lost and you end up just with this, I'm going to say mediocre, and then it becomes a, yeah, it's okay, it's all right.
What I often say, so we've got different parts of the different businesses that that I have in my team. One of them are the analytics and insights team. And what I often say to them is, you, there's no point just providing insights every month or every quarter to say, these are the things we found, and this is the so what from what we see from the data. Every customer, you need to think about yourself. If you were at your own home and you had a Sky subscription, and suddenly you don't have your Sky Sports, and you really love sports, and it's not been shown for the last 2 months, and you missed the Formula One or the rugby or the football, you're surely going to kick up and probably change providers, right? And you have to look at you providing a service to a customer. Is that compelling enough that you want to pay next month? And do you want to continue to pay that service? Because I believe that insights alone, if I have the same quarterly insights, that you're just basically playing the data that you already have into a better format, that's not good enough. It needs to end with, you've saved 20% here, you've improved stickiness with customer here, or you've added 2 more services as a result of, or we've cost avoided this because of, or we've run this meritocracy program where we've selected better suppliers as a result of. Like, there has to be something at the end of this that gives you motivation to reassign next year. And there's no different to being connected via technology, right? So to your point, you might have your quick wins on the POC. Yes, we saved 20%. Everyone's happy and all gravy. But that asset manager for year 2 needs to be satisfied that I'm paying for the same thing. Am I still saving 20%? Are we really validating the data properly? And what else could we do? You know, like, as an asset manager, generally you lose interest very quickly if you start looking at your budget and you're going, oh, what is this line again? I forgot about this. Someone else before me signed up to this and I'm not really seeing the benefit. And sometimes you've got air quality devices in the building, and if you look at it, batteries have failed a year and a half ago. It's not even reading the data anymore. Like, you need to have a process set up that constantly reminds people, constantly bring people into the picture. And what we have, what we set up in our teams is we have, so you've got your technology platforms, uh, and you've got your insights team, and the insights team generally it's a service that's provided, that's not connected to any of the technology teams, um, but it brings all the different layers into one story to the client. So if you have, let's say, a grid edge platform connected to the site, it will take that data and all the results that you're getting, whether it's an energy saving, whether it's a improvement on air quality, or whatever you're doing, bringing that into a data set. It's looking at the operational data for the building, so your reactive calls, and they're bringing everything into one place where they're going to the client, and based on what we're seeing and all of this, that's all you need to know. FM, asset manager, or engineer, and that's more helpful than just say credits on its own, providing a service here on its own, and the asset manager going, well, what's the correlation between the deep key data that we've got over here? And that's what I think has been helpful with what we've built, is that we have the insights piece that provide holistic data based on various different data sets, regardless of where it's coming from.
I'm smiling as you're talking there, Andre, and I get very passionate with, the teams that and people we work with. The same. I think I go, so what? I literally sit and I go, right, this partner, whoever it is I'm working with, been working with us now for 18 months. You show me why I'm going to sit here and get excited. And the teams, and you can see it with everybody's trying to deliver, trying to do lots, and they go, oh, what do you mean? And you're like, well, what's out of it? I get the data, I get the bit, I've heard it, I've seen it. I'm now, I've gone to that bit in the journey, especially when they're with you after a little while, because people get used to what you provide them.
Yeah.
So I'm sure once they're with you for a few years, they've got used to that, and that's become their new standard. So they're then going, "What is it else that you're going to give me?" And unless you're doing that, which is what you're kind of talking about, which is got to keep wowing, you got to keep giving value back, because at some point somebody's going to ask the question and they need to feel that value. I nearly shivered when you said about turning my Sky TV off and my sports channel. Yeah, I was having a bit of an issue there with that bit, but I can feel that bit from a customer going, really? What what are you doing for me? So that's really fascinating. But I suppose that bit ties into, you had your own company and you obviously were successful in that, and I imagine you learned a lot of different elements to that from the corporate world and versus that startup and growth. But that alongside, you also then went into the JLL Spark bit, and I mean, give us an insight of those different skills that you had to kind of look at from a different angle, because you were now looking at, imagine looking at it from evaluating of somebody else's company and why it was valuable, which is a very different angle to being in the hot seat, believing your company is always, you're always trying to drive that value, but it's a very different perspective. What did you see differently there? What was the different skills that you had to learn?
So one of the most fascinating things about it was I had to learn so much more about the financial part of why you invest, and the type of valuation that somebody's business. I almost feel like it's monopoly money in a way. When you come from a very strict operational budget in real estate, where every pence counts, you go to venture capital world, which is like, can make a decision between 1 million and 5 million, and it could have flipped in each way based on what the gut feeling of the team is in the room. So it was a different world for me to wrap my head around the valuation of businesses and learning around why you do that, and really understanding the long-term impact of the patience you need to have for some of these early stage companies overall, right? Everyone is, especially having my own business, you're so passionate, you believe in what you do. What most startup companies are more interested in, as you know, is the revenue. You need to, because that's what the VCs are after, right? It's the numbers. And yeah, so it was, I think for me, it was really important to understand what's the driving factors around the investment decisions. And that's the biggest part of my learning curve over that 4-year period. However, what I found fascinating was actually as a new role, because when it comes to, call it, facility management as a layer, based on my background, it's like a little bubble in real estate, but it's not the whole real estate ecosystem. So part of that role allowed me to open up a better understanding of the wider real estate ecosystem. And so you scan, first of all, you spend time with the global organization, understanding whether you support sustainability or valuations or property asset management or whatever part of the organization you represent. And we start there by saying, what's your gaps? Where's the white space? What are you missing that can help? And then we played it back to the industry to say, well, this is what we're looking for. What startups are available? So we started there. Is what's the draw and what's the need? So that was good for me, because I learned a phenomenal amount around actually what is and the language to use for some of those teams, right? What is your gaps? What's your white space? And, what are you currently using? And then really playing your way back. And I think that's a good sales technique for startups in the first place, is really not going there selling your product so hard, but spending more time with the customer, understanding their challenges, and then just finding that little wedge somewhere that you can find as an opportunity to start growing, right? So that was great, to first understanding that transaction between understanding what's the gaps and then playing it back to what's available in the market, and then spending time with these startups and scale ups and really understanding their logic around how they're approaching the real estate market, whether it's some of JLL or JLL's customers, because there's always this nervousness when you work for big brands. Is, I think people always desperately, or startups definitely, want to join those big logos. That's their biggest ambition, because I think that will give us the next level of funding that we need. And that, for me, as a lesson, has been probably the worst mistake companies can make, is trying to attract those big logos, because you spend up so much resource and time, and that's no negative bearing on JLL. It happens all over. It's because the priority for that team versus the startup is completely misaligned. And you often get led down this path of, yeah, we're interested, takes 3 months. Can you build this? We need this little widget and whatever. You end up spending so much time. And in the end, they say, sorry, it's not really something that we think we can do today. And they've put all their eggs in that basket. Where I think the best strategy and the best success that I've seen is where you use a smaller customer, perhaps, and you really invest a lot of your time and your effort and you build the brand with that customer, you grow with them, and you become so solidified in your offering that other brands are starting to get FOMO. A really good example of this is probably Demand Logic in Legal in General, where the amount of people that probably would have approached Legal in General with different offerings and solutions, they just stuck to it and said, "But we're sticking with this company, whether they're good or bad, or not doing a perfect job. We're investing our time here, our energy, and today it's a great case study." And there's multiple ones that I can bring up of customers that have done a similar thing, and I think, and that's just 28. That's not the whole portfolio; it's just a small amount. And I feel. Um, and I think a similar thing with you, probably with Royal Opera House back in the days with the BP relationship. Great example. They were very passionate. They wanted to use you. And that's a really good example of how I think I would approach it if I was a startup or scale up is don't go, because if you look at the customers that JLR manage or CBRE, it'll be your HSBC or JPMC. It's like these big logos, and they generally, as an asset manager from a JLR perspective, they don't want to risk their reputation or potential issue with a startup company, and that's why they're very much like they try not to push it too hard, because it's not worth. When it comes to facility management contracts, their contract values are 10 million, 100 million. It's numbers that startups can only dream of a lot of the time. For them to do a 5K pilot might sound significant, but it's not worth risking their relationship because of the bigger amount that they invoice every year.
The risk profile that could be impacted because of that bigger contract that sits on that. Yeah, I suppose that fits into that bit, and maybe the bit you just described is what you would say. But now you've seen lots of startups and you've been involved in different elements of it. I mean, what is it? Is there a signal, a quality thing that a business is doing that they're the ones probably got the real chance of succeeding? I mean, I'm going to say it's a messy reality, but the built environment is a quite a challenging space to operate in. But is there something you notice in certain startups or growth businesses that you would say signals are probably on the right track versus others that may be doing something else?
It's so hard because I think a lot of the time it's not necessarily the startup or the product. Uh, it's the actual organization or the target audience that you're talking to are generally the wrong people that you're speaking to. And they don't really actually either have the budget authority or they have the right level of experience to understand what it is that you need to deliver. I think the most common problem is that lack of understanding of the go-to market and how I've always been. So when it comes to technology adoption, I I've always looked at this from a scale perspective, and what's the biggest way that you can adopt technology? I think we may have had this discussion in the past, is a lot of the companies go straight to the asset owner, for example. It's very rare that they would necessarily, quickly anyway, make that decision and say, right, let's do this. It happens, but it's extremely rare. But my approach has always been, it depends what your service offering or your technology offering is. But if you go back to, say, a HVAC related or a BMS related technology that optimize properties, for example, then if you look at who's maintaining those assets, what service company maintain those contracts with the landlord, I always see that as your quickest way in. It's hard to convince those companies. But I think if I was to spend my time and my effort in trying to scale my business, I would spend my time there because they already have the contract set up with the client. They already have a maintenance contract. All you're asking is, we need to somehow convince you to spend a bit more, but we're going to save you money, right? And we'll be more innovative and it's a lot easier to sign off internally. It's a lot easier to manage that risk internally. And I'd rather spend a year with one real large M&E company, invest my time, but access probably 40 or 50 or 60 of their customers naturally, quickly, if that makes sense. So I
Yeah.
often think it's who you're trying to talk to or communicate to. and not really understanding the internal barriers that you have to make that a success. The things that has made for me in the past is we try and make it as part of the service offering to say, these are our customers. We're really maintaining those assets on behalf of our customers. It's our job to make it compelling that we provide this now as a service as well. And how do we do that? How do we broker that conversation with the clients and not expect the company to do it or the third
Yeah,
parties?
yeah. So make sure you make it happen, make the outcome happen, which is the important part. What's the result? What's the win for everybody?
But I think one of your questions is like, what unique features do you see in a company? There's a few companies that has been like it stands out for me. It actually comes down to that customer success person that you're dealing with
Yeah,
generally
yeah,
are are just an amazing person to be, because that deal doesn't necessarily happen after the first call. It might be the third time you've met with that person, but it's the charm, it's the making sure that you have other conversation other than just you have to do this because I'm saving you money. Why are you not doing it? Right? It needs to be a bit more natural. It needs to be a bit more. And I'll be honest with you, that helps a lot of the time where you start to build a relationship with people because it's trust at the end of the day. Um, that I think convince people that you're the right company to deal with. Because it's what we're seeing as well here, especially is we're focusing the technology for me is a means of gathering data, and it could be if I'm completely honest, it could be anything, especially in the modern world where Microsoft is creating data lakes for large organizations. What you're really interested in is just getting the data in there as quick as possible and run your own analytics. But what we're focusing on heavily is actually the people piece, understanding that it's the technology alone would not help you to do anything. You need the people to understand what's the value. How do you continuously get all the stakeholders involved all the time? One of our contracts, we have BMS contractors, we've got maintenance engineers, we've got facility man, we've got like 6 different stakeholders in one building that we have like weekly calls with them to say, this is what the data is telling us. These are the actions we've created. Who's dealing with this? And it's been going on for like 3 or 4 years now. And it's still, you think, well, that sounds like an outdated process, but it still works. It still makes that people understand and constantly think about what do I need to do differently. So people often think too much around the technology aspect and not the people piece.
yeah. Totally on the same page with you, what you described there. That when I look back, even my career in multiple, different industries, and it is right. The technology does have a key part, but it's near enough unequal. It's people and technology together that makes the solution. If you don't get both bits right, it doesn't work, no matter who you speak to. You see the same thing. The tech isn't right, you don't have the answers, you don't have an easy way of scaling. People aren't right, you've lost the relationship, you've lost the trust, and it doesn't last very long. And I suppose that leads on to the bit about, you guys launched the Symphony, I think it was a smart building show, with an aim to take FM to that more, I suppose, passive, proactive world.
Yeah.
What is that gap user in the market that you believe you're solving or trying to solve? Is this new kind of a way of doing it? What is it you see being different that Symphony's doing?
So for us, the word we try and use is, I mentioned earlier, is this meritocracy and autonomy for engineers. Because I believe that the best value you can get out of an engineer is by not just telling them what to do, telling them you need to turn up to that site and execute on these sort of data points. The platform that we're creating with Symphony is providing engineers with autonomy, right, to have the capability of looking at data and making their own decision. So stepping into a site saying, well, I know I've got these PPMs to do, but I'm looking at this and I'm going to prioritize this based on what the data is telling me. And there's a whole education piece around this. So they get like a Symphony Academy. So once you've gone through the program, you understand different tech stacks, you understand predictive condition-based maintenance strategies, you understand what's the movement from SFT20 to demand-led maintenance. So it's a seal of approval to say, I know what I'm doing now. I understand this, and I feel like I've got a bit more authority to try and do things differently. And if it's challenged, at least there's been, we don't just do that with our own engineers. So Bellrock, if you're not aware, they do self-deliver where customers ask, but actually majority of the case, it's a supply chain management, and they performance manage various different suppliers and service providers and managing agents. So it's very much set up so that the best and customers can pay for the best, or they can pay for an average. And it's managed through a program that really looks at the data and educates you. So Symphony is not one thing, and it sort of says it in the name. It's a combination of various different things: the people piece, the technology piece, looking at the data, creating a meritocracy program so that people feel empowered, but also scored, in a way that you are picked above your peers based on your performance.
Yeah. So that makes more sense. Yeah, I understand. So you've got this kind of piece that's kind of back to what we were just talking about in a way, isn't it? It's that combination of best practice, technology, people, relationships, stakeholders, all that coming together to deliver results. And if it's not delivering results, then I suppose the question is why is anybody doing it? Is probably what everybody should ask.
Yeah, when you look at the data, so because of Concerto, which is our it's our IWMS platform that most of our clients use as the property management data for everything in the value chain. So that could be your supply chain data, that could be your service provider data, it could be your CAFM data, so your PPM reactive. It all goes into one performance set at the top. And they use us as the insights team to tell them, is this really good? So this is my portfolio. I've got 1,200 properties currently being charged X per square meter, or, an average call out charge. Is this good? Is this good? So they're really using us actually as a benchmark to say, should I be doing things differently here? And then we say, that's okay, but you could, depending on what you pay, you could probably get this. And it's like, it gives clients a bit of a, yeah, okay, fine. You could procure it for us and you can manage for us. And we feel like the data is reliable enough for us to make a decision.
I mean that is definitely a step forward and a step into that new world of where I suppose trying to lead the industry in a different approach. But it isn't one thing. Everybody speaks to people going, well, what's the silver bullet? There isn't a silver bullet. There's a combination of things. And what you're talking about with Symphony sounds really, really good. With all the innovation that you've funded and seen, what problem do you still see in managing assets, buildings, managing energy, all those elements that I'm going to say keeps you up at night, but it's the thing that's probably still the thing that you go, if we could we solve this? What's next on that agenda, do you think?
That's a tricky one because I feel like a lot of people are doing it in different ways, but they're not necessarily, let's say they hit 7 out of the 10 ticks. So I wouldn't say, if I'm honest, like when you look at sustainability, there's there's me personally actually on waste data. So the way we report on waste, which is probably one of the biggest gaps in the market, that I think, in the way that we record the waste and we get rid of the waste. For example, there's a couple of companies that do really well. Carrot's a good example, Norwegian company that's entering the UK. They're doing really well. But when I look at sustainability, when it comes to utility monitoring or sub-metering, it's a saturated market, as you probably know, right? So, but when it comes to waste, I think there's still a bit of a gap in how we're doing it and the reasons why we are doing it. There's some legislation that's now encouraging occupiers to report on their data well enough, but I feel that there's still a big gap there in the market. But when it comes to other tech, I've got to think about this now. But yeah, this is perhaps a good one actually. Is when it comes to buildings with large infrastructure, like offices, for instance, or healthcare, there's dense assets, there's a lot of assets, you generally have a BMS. So I feel like over the last 10 years, a lot of companies has come on this journey and they've helped manage that. And as assets improve, i.e., let's say a pump gets replaced with a modern pump, it's now got a bit more of a digital layer to it. And things are becoming a bit more digital, right? So you're actually getting data into a place where you can monitor it a little bit more better remotely. But I think about 70% of the UK market, probably the rest of the world is very similar, sites that doesn't have a BMS. And it's sites that have assets, especially in the retail sector, where you've got just assets not connected to anything, and it's just run depending on that manager on that site. And their ambition to either turn things on or off. And often in those environments, you have fridges that run overnight. And because of the heat that it gives off, you run AC overnight.
Yeah.
For me, the biggest gap when I did a bit of analysis is probably in that space. I don't think there's enough companies disrupting it properly, and making it easy enough and cost effective to manage it on a national scale, especially those environments that I'm talking about will have thousands of sites. And again, I go back to my point earlier, you can do 2 sites, 3 sites, but how do you do 1,000? And
Yeah.
and I think there's still, I guess, in your industry, I think there's still a really big gap there in making that seamless, easy, accessible, portfolio manageable. Um, when we do the scan of the market, it's still a bit of a need, I think, for proper disruption in it.
Yeah, yeah, but I'm smiling as you mentioned a few of those scenarios because I kind of relate to some of those. And even in the building I'm in just now, which is it's an office environment, but it's controlled centrally in one part, and then there's so many separated assets, and so you just know this place is completely inefficient because of the way it's been set up, and it's probably never been thought through from when it was built for what it's now used for, which is the gap. The gap was it was built for a purpose. The purpose changed over the last probably 10 years. A very different environment with lots of different assets in it. And you go, right, multiply that up by 100, 200, 700. But how do you manage that? That is a space. Yeah, there's definitely innovation in it, but it's a much harder space to sort at the moment.
And also we have an asset verification business, where we do dilapidation on buildings. So you go in there and you go, what, these are the assets, blah, blah, blah. Quite shockingly, and it's such a big job every year. And as you change contracts, they do it again, because generally
Yeah,
you have a 3+2 contract with service providers. And mind-blowingly, that is still one of the most manual processes around. I think a lot of people claim they do different things and they make it more digital. And as a result of the data we collected, you now have a net zero strategy, and you also have a proper condition survey. From what I've seen, I think that area could do with a cost effective disruption that I think is really helpful for anyone else in the value chain further down the line. And it generally starts there by having accuracy in that data and having a place to host the data. A lot of organizations are now crying out for finally the digital twin, right? So there's a lot of people for 10 years now that's been speaking about it, and they really struggle because financially you just can't justify the expense of it, right? So you're still better off running it very manually because of how much it costs. So we're seeing a brand new interest in saying, well, where are we today with costs and what systems can allow us to do it? And I think that's getting better. There's a couple of companies that we're seeing that's really getting better, and you're almost getting to a point where it's making financial sense. So I think bringing it together, not just from a single lens point of view, but more holistic. Then really the cutoff for me is you've got your O&M data or your build-based data, and you've got your operational data. There's just like a complete brick wall between the two. And that's what customers are dying to get into one place and have synergy against the data flow.
yeah. So yeah, definitely that piece of that that information that just seems to get lost. If you could carry that, and enough that it doesn't get lost, it evolves. It's a living piece of
Yeah.
information. But it's such a hard one, I think, is make it easy because the systems to date, they're all quite pain. The systems that have been in place over the years are all quite painful for people to maintain. The more you can make it easy, the more chance you have of people updating that. But I mean, you've had a fantastic career, and where all the elements that you've been involved in, and where you are now, a great opportunity to I suppose change and evolve and drive the market forward. Has it been people you along the way that's been a mentor or people that have really, I suppose, given you advice that's allowed you to grow so much in the years? Is there people around your journey that you would highlight that really gave you that inspiration?
There's quite a number, to be honest with you. So I remember in the venture capital world, Raj Singh, who I reported into, was just one of these amazing pioneers in the VC world. It is just one of those people that you can ask him 10 things and you'll have these 10 amazing theories that come out of it, and it just really constantly makes you think about what you do. He was quite inspiring to work for, and I learned so much during that journey in the venture capital world. So after that, after Spark, I wasn't really questioning where do I want to go next. And the person that's really inspired me most recently is actually Carlo, our CEO here. I haven't met any person that is so customer obsessed, is probably the right word, and so has such a big ambition to create transformation and change with the adoption of technology. I've never met anyone with a bigger focus and a drive and a commitment. And I'm inspired by the drive and the commitment, not just with our customers, but with our people, to have the same culture and the same ambition. It's That's been for me a career highlight, to actually end up here where I'm most inspired at the moment, to give me that next level of drive personally, of where actually I never knew I've got this additional drive inside me. So that's been someone that's really standing out for me at the moment as a great leader.
I mean, I was expecting you to tell some people along the journey, but the fact you're in a role today that also has that person that's driving, and I was smiling as you were saying it, because that customer obsession is it's what changes the game for everything. If you have that focus on customer, and that's there, I'm kind of feeling excited for where you guys are at. I'm going, this is brilliant where you are at. So that's great, fantastic to hear. I just want to, I suppose, finally, just to finish up, I suppose, is there's lots of people starting the journey in this world, and different elements of real estate and built environments and coming into that. What's your little bit of advice, and how would you steer them in getting on that journey? And what could they, one thing that they could do that will help them in their journey in this space?
So one of the things that I feel I'm really good at is my network and the people I'm connected to. And everyone that I've connected with over my career history or personal life, I've followed and I've really respected along the way, because that person might work for you today, but they might be your boss in 3 years' time. They might be your client in 5 years' time. And I've had that ability to always stay connected with people and don't think about where you are today as this is it. Like, even your university friends might end up being your business partner or co-founder one day, or it could be your client one day. It's really important to think now at an early stage, align yourself with those type of people that you believe could help you grow and be successful in the future. And that's been almost like a superpower of mine, to try and always go to events, go to networking events, or go to industry events, and just keep connecting with people. Like, sitting in your home in a new hybrid world will not make you successful. I can tell you that for free. That would be my one thing. If I can go, obviously I've been really successful and I've really enjoyed it, but that's one thing I don't think young people today are thinking about constantly. Like, how can I expand my network? And that thing about don't underestimate the person next to you or under you, where they could be in the future, because that really, really is something that I've carried for my whole career.
Love that piece of advice. Andre, I mean, thank you for sharing an unparalleled experience with us today. It's been fantastic. I could probably talk for hours and listen to more. But your journey is a powerful statement to the value of understanding the industry, and more importantly, understanding the customer. You said it so many times in the conversation. What is the problem you're trying to solve? How do you make the customer's life better? And that's inspirational. From the top down, bottom up, and it's really exciting to hear what you guys are doing. Thank you for your time today, and for those listening today, recommend connecting with Andre on LinkedIn. Follow what he's doing in this property tech space ecosystem, changing the way we run these buildings. Get connected and make a difference yourself. Thanks for having us. I'm Paul McCocktail, Green Edge CEO. I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Nice to be connected. Cheers, mate.